All right, hello guys. My name is Kamar Kelly. I will be your host today. I'm 18 and a new graduate of Elizabeth Dean High School in Bladensburg, Maryland. I identify as a Black female. My pronouns are she, her. Today, we are coming together to discuss the need for representation of Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC for short. We're talking about their history, their needs, and schools. We're discussing the increasing demand for multilingual representation in predominantly non-English speaking communities, what it means to be a student to American values, and how cultural competency, impacts teaching. This session will center some voices of equity in Civics Youth Fellowship, including myself. I hope you all enjoy. And before we begin, we do have one panelist who is off camera. Well, not off camera, but she has joined via satellite, so she is not presently in the middle of this recording. But to join this conversation and more like this, please use the hashtag Civics for Us. That is a capital C, Civics, capital F, for, and capital U, us. So all that blabber aside, now to get this party started, the panelists will introduce themselves and their interests. And since I'm speaking first, I will go first. So my interests are public health policy, racial equity, and the pursuit of authenticity. Now let's get Morgan Gibson to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Morgan Gibson. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 14 years old and go to Hanscom Middle School in the Lexington, Massachusetts area. I identify as Black, and my area of interest is law and social justice.
Hello, my name is Claudia Salgado. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm a graduated senior at James Madison Memorial High School in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm an immigrant from Honduras, Tegucigalpa, and I moved in here to the United States in 2015. Lastly, I will be pursuing my career in law enforcement in UW-Madison by majoring in legal studies.
Hi, my name is Ellie Dergarian. I am currently a junior in high school, attending Clark College in Southwest Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a registered member of the Chickasaw Nation. I am currently pursuing a career as a doctor in gastroenterology, and I'm really looking forward to contributing my point of view in this awesome panel.
Yes, I'm so excited to be in discussion with you guys. We're all very, very intelligent. We have Morgan, she's super young. And again, to encourage tweeting and the hashtag on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter, please use the hashtag Civics for Us. That's a capital C, F, and U. Okay, now for the first question, you guys. In your experience, do you see your cultural group or ethnicity represented in your education? How are BIPOC stories uplifted in education, if at all? And since Morgan, you went first, I'm going to switch the order a little bit, and Ellie, you can go first.
Okay, so up until I had this wonderful civics teacher in the 8th grade, Miss Dowdy, I learned that Native Americans were either violent, I'm sorry to say it, savages, pretty much, or they were so happy to share their land with European settlers, and it was wonderful. Nothing was violent. There was no unnecessary deaths. And what? The Trail of Tears? I've never heard of it. But from my family, I still learned like my ancestors' history. Like my great grandmother was put in what they called Indian schools, where they basically tried to remove culture and whitewash everything that Native Americans had, strip their culture from them essentially. And that was really unsettling to like not hear anything about from at school at all. And it's disgraceful, really. And other than that, the first day of Black History Month, like a teacher will say like something about, other cultures one day a year, and then the rest of the year, nothing is mentioned at all. And it's really not good to put less eloquently.
No, you're perfectly fine. That was eloquent enough. Thank you for sharing. Morgan, please contribute.
Similar to Ellie, I haven't had a lot of representation at all in my educational experience. The curriculum at I go to a predominantly white school, and so the curriculum at my school and the school itself, neither are very diverse in general. And so it's it's disappointing just to not be able to see myself or people that look like me represented in the curriculum. And up until recent years, such as this, or up until the spring of 2020, there wasn't much of a push for a diverse curriculum. But after that, this year they've done a lot more to make the curriculum more diverse. But in years past, it's been similar to Ellie, where it's like the first day of Black History Month, if that at all. And then the only other cultural month that is celebrated is Hispanic Heritage Month, and that's because we have Spanish as a core class. So yeah, similar to Ellie, it's just there's not much representation of my culture in my educate or in my personal education.
Yeah, I experienced a similar thing at my high school or the high school I went to. There has been a strong push for racial equity and then cultural competency in the classroom because of all of kind of this racial reckoning, is what a lot of people are calling it, which is great. It's just unfortunate that many people had to die for that to happen. So, like the experiences you all shared, I had a similar one. I actually have the unique perspective of coming from a predominantly Black region. So, the illustrious Prince George's County, Maryland, I'm super proud. We are the #1 hotspot for affluent Black individuals in the country. And still, my educational experience mimics much of the experiences shared by the students in this panel and across the nation. Um, I remember playing a simple trivia game when I was younger, and we were asked to state where the countries were located, and I couldn't do it. It's interesting to note that not only do schools not teach about the history of certain groups, they also don't teach about the existence of these groups, even spatially. Like, we know where Africa is because it's gigantic, and one of the first things you see when you turn the globe, if you have it in the classroom. But as far as the countries within it, bordering it, I'm lost. Like so many students, especially in the countries in Asia and the Middle East. So that's a very interesting perspective, in my opinion. And most of the cultural teachings that I have come from my parents and my community. In school, if we were lucky, we read a book centering race or people of color narratives once a year, but that started in 8th grade. Um, and I will say that my educational environment has been more accepting of these topics, though the curriculum is underwhelmingly not reflexive of that acceptance. The school simply coexists with the awareness of culture without fully embracing and enveloping culture into the education, which would be a dream. And I believe Claudia, the panelist who would be joining with us today, could not, unfortunately, but her response has been recorded and it will probably go here.
Alright, so though I attend to one of the most diverse school buildings from my district, which 55% of it is made up of students of color, there is still a gap of students of color and white students among the courses of the school, especially among the 3 courses, like AP and honors courses, which is built up by predominantly white students, leading it to have a lower ratio towards students of color. Thus, this has made my education be taught for most of it from a white dominant perspective among my courses, such as history, to also among my scientific courses too.
Okay, so now for question 2. What does cultural competency look like in our education system, and how could anti-racism be taught in our schools? And first, I want to quickly define what anti-racism is so we all have like a borderline definition. It is the active participation of, this is off the fly. It's like an active kind of denial or rejection of racism, racist thoughts, racist policies, and racist ideas. So with that being said, I think we had Ellie go first last time, so let's flip it, Morgan.
So, in my opinion, cultural competency in our education system is when students are being exposed to a to a diverse group of cultures different than their own. And so, I feel that anti-racism can be taught in our schools by first acknowledging that racism exists, because that would set a foundation. So just saying, yes, our country, there is a lot of racism that goes on in our country, but how can we be a part of the solution instead of the problem? And teaching kids what racism has looked like in the past and what it looks like in the present, because it still or because it still exists today, so that we can make sure that history doesn't repeat itself.
I like it. I like it. Ellie.
Yeah, to add to that, I really haven't seen a lot of teaching about other cultures in my school personally. My basically elementary to middle school experience was very like European centric, because that's in my community we have predominantly European ancestry, so there's not a lot else being taught. It's a lot of whitewashing. But also currently there's this request, a Freedom of Information Act going out by anti-Black Lives Matter group, where they requested that all curriculum being taught about anti-racism in my community be disclosed by teachers. So any history, English, any teacher that's ever said anything about anti-racism curriculum has to disclose their curriculum to this group. And from there, they're basically trying to make a point that Black Lives Matter has like infiltrated the schooling system and is trying to poison the youth pretty much. I don't know how awareness and empathy is poisoning the youth, but apparently it is. And currently next year, there's going to be 4 seats on the school board going up, and a lot of people from this group who are trying to prevent anti-racist teachings are running for that. So it's a little scary in terms of how well my community is actually going to be able to fit into a greater, more empathetic or forward-thinking mindset, but hopefully it doesn't go too horribly for us here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I want to talk about that a little bit more before we move on to my response in the next question. So, for the anti racist teachings, would that be basically anything addressing race or the fact that racism exists and how?
Yes, anything about slavery or Native American history, anything that's like something bad happened to a cultural group.
Mhm.
Has to be disclosed.
Okay. And how does that impact the students and the community if it did pass?
Well, it's like the point of this like request is to use the information disclosed to make a political statement, or to like have it be used as like a weapon against the current education in place. So showing that, I don't know, Black Lives Matter curriculum, or like they're trying to show that I'm sorry, by anti-racist curriculum being in place, it's like some kind of horrible conspiracy theory that's just causing problems in the community and making students more empathetic. Whoa! And they're trying to prevent it from being taught ever.
Radicalizing the students. I get you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Proud supporter of Black Lives Matter. I am Black. How would I not support that? But yeah, that's astonishing. I hope things get better for your state. And in my opinion, I think cultural competency starts with the adults. It starts with the administration being aware of the amount of BIPOC students in their care and making sure they are comfortable learning and engaging with the rest of the student population, teachers, and other staff and faculty. If it's private, like my school is, the administrators need to make sure that their institution is as accessible to different kinds of people as possible. Like a $40,000 high school is outrageous. It makes no sense. It's terrible for college. Who would want to pay that for high school, or better yet, middle school? That's a little tangent. Sorry. Cultural Competency starts with teachers becoming aware of their biases, including how certain narratives and language they or their students use may impact other students negatively. It looks like being compassionate to all students, asking them what they need, and giving them support whenever necessary. Teachers must take their classrooms seriously and teach students a true depiction of life, even if that strays from the written curriculum. These strategies can also teach anti racism, discouraging false and harmful narratives and encouraging ones that are true, inclusive, and singular. History is not about painting a picture of one group of people and saying this is these people. It's supposed to be an insight into how life was for individuals. So we really need to emphasize the fact that people move singularly. I'm an independent person, Ellie is, and so is Morgan. We all live our independent existences and have our own experiences. So I think it's really important for us to stop stereotyping or classifying people as a group.
Cultural competence means the exposure of foreign environments/cultures where one is able to experience beyond their own native surroundings. And from my perspective, the United States likes to implement this overall concept among their citizens, especially among the students of the national educational system, thus failing to expose the students to have more of a diverse background rather than their own one. Therefore, we urgently need to address this concept of systematic racism as it would allow us to comprehend that racist perspective is taught rather than being inherited with since as a kid. It would also allow us to go in depth of these causes and effects among the generation and how it has evolved us into our society.
Yeah. So for the next question, we have for regions with high populations of multilingual persons or non English speakers, should their schools teach and use multiple languages? How could schools encourage students being multilingual?
American school system should minimally expect to have different resources of communications for reasons not only for translation but also to achieve the overall concept that we were discussing earlier of cultural competence, where students are able to enrich their own cultural perspective. And also, along with it, it would allow us to deconstruct the stereotype of America as only dominated by the language of English among white people on this country.
Okay. Scientifically speaking, I think it's ridiculous that more schools don't encourage two languages being taught from the beginning. Because if you look at brain scans, there's been studies where they take scans of people, bilingual or multilingual people, and they can see like how much more developed their brains are in terms of like their neurons, and they have more receptors, and I could go into neurons a lot more, but I'm gonna save you all from that tangent. um, but I mean, if you look at Europe, I mean, Europe students can't get by without learning English or multiple languages at least. Why can't we be doing that here, especially when we border Mexico, which is a predominantly another language speaking country? Why can't we learn Spanish and be able to communicate with our neighbors? And not only that, a huge percentage of people in the United States speak Spanish or another language, and so not being able to communicate with our fellow Americans is really adding more a divide into our American populace and community than we should be. I think teaching multiple languages in schools would really help, heal the divide that's already there, but also connect and learn more perspectives of different people from different walks of life.
Yeah, the communication barrier is a barrier to understanding. Morgan, your perspective?
I would definitely agree with Ellie. I think that schools should definitely teach students to use multiple languages and put an emphasis on that so that non-English speakers that are coming into the school are receiving an equitable education, because I think people fail to realize how difficult it is to come to or to come into a school environment not speaking the language that everyone else speaks and how difficult that would be on a student who's trying to get an education. And so I think that to help bridge that gap, if some of the students could meet the, for example, non-English student speaking students halfway by learning their language, it could help with communication a lot to make those students feel more comfortable. I also think that students can encourage student people to be multilingual by putting, as I said before, like putting an emphasis on learning these languages, and encouraging students to prioritize their learning of the language. I think that that's not happening right now currently, because I know from my own experience, Spanish, or we have Spanish class in my school, and it's kind of, I don't want to say a joke, but people don't take it as seriously as the other classes. And so I think that's a problem because, as Ellie said, there are many benefits to speaking, to being bilingual, I'll say. And then the last thing that I'll add is that, once again, speaking to my school, just because there hasn't been an emphasis in my school, they're taking away the Spanish teachers classes in order to make way for an entire seventh grade team. And so which hasn't been there before, and my Spanish teacher was talking about how that kind of plays into equity and what kind of message that's sending to students, that learning that the message sending to the students is that the cultural class, the one cultural class that we have, is not as important as other classes because they're not going to have a classroom and they're getting it taken away. So yeah, to end that statement, I definitely would agree with Ellie.
Yeah, I really like and agree with the point about kind of the prioritization of different classes. I mean, we see that all the time with the STEM versus history and civics, and we could go on and on and on about that, but that's for another time. And to join conversations like that, please use the hashtag Civics for Us, capital C, capital F, capital U, on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And I'll add my thoughts because I do have some. I think it's especially important for communities with significant non-English or multilingual populations to use multiple languages. It's important for education to be accessible to every kind of person as possible. Like Morgan was saying, that's incredibly discouraging if you go to an institution to learn and you can't even understand the basics of, like, well, they might know what the bathroom sign looks like, but for a small child, like how to just even walk around the campus might be very difficult. And school is supposed to be a safe space for learning. And while I have only ever known English, I can imagine the shame and embarrassment someone might have if they can't simply interact with the lesson or read something because they don't understand the language. And actually, I remember in elementary school, a little boy I used to be friends with had a similar experience. We were elementary school, it was kindergarten, so we were all very young, and I think his family just came over to the United States, and he was practicing the alphabet, and he really needed help learning what things were. He had to sound things out, and it took him longer time to process because he didn't speak English or as well as other English speakers did in my class. And that was really heartbreaking for me because I didn't know how to help him. I didn't speak Spanish, and I still don't now. And back then there wasn't a lot of emphasis on Spanish. In my community now, there are at least instructions in Spanish sometimes, like there'll be like little caps, and I think we should put that on or make that available for a larger scale of kind of materials. Um, yeah, but I think this is our last question, guys. So we're gonna make it a good one. What are BIPOC students taught it means to be an American citizen? And Ellie, you went first last time, so Morgan.
So I believe that BIPOC students are taught that it means that they have access to the rights and protections under the Constitution, even if it doesn't apply to all people. So when a lot of times when people immigrate to America, they'll hear a lot of like, "Oh, you should be proud to be in this country," or like you should have pride to be an American. And you'll have and they expect to have all the all excuse me, they expect to have protection under the Constitution, but in some cases, because of the way that our society is, that's not always the case for all people, which is extremely unfortunate that people are taught, students specifically, are taught that's what they're taught to expect, but in school, but that's not always the case. They're also taught that it means to have a concern for others, and as I said, like take pride in the country that we all call home. Um, and not and although not everyone has a concern for others or is happy with the state of the nation, that is what BIPOC students are taught. They're taught, as I said, to just be proud to be in this country, and that people are everyone collaborates with each other, and that's the American way, and to reach the American dream when it's unaccessible because of the systemic racism and sexism that just exists, and so much more that exists in our country.
That was very, very, very well said. I agree wholeheartedly, but I'll leave my comments till the end. Let's go, Ellie.
I really love what you said. I just wanted to add to that. I mean, in the Constitution, it says all men are created equal, but really, what it should say is all white landowning men who come from wealthy backgrounds and are created equal and have privilege over others is what we should be taught, because that's the reality. And often I feel like it's just ignored so much, and bringing light to the systemic inequity and sexism, like Morgan was saying, and like actually teaching students that, hey, this is something that you will be facing in the real world. Like if you're gonna go and apply for a job, you're gonna see like a wage gap, you're gonna see racism, and you're going to have all kinds of conflicts, but that's not okay. Like you shouldn't be accepting that. You should be moving forward. You should be fighting for a different reality. You shouldn't be taught that, just don't say anything about it, don't notice it, pretend like it's not there. You should be taught that this isn't right and we should be making a difference. And since we're the youth of we're the young people, we're the ones who are supposed to be making the change. And how are we supposed to do that if we don't even know what we're facing? To continue that, we're taught that civil discourse is a natural part of government. But when we get into the real world, I feel like there's so much dismay around people having actual civil discourse, or people being unhappy with the state of the nation, or the current state of things. Like if you look at civil rights, or what I really think should be called human rights, if you look at that, so many people get upset when you try to advocate for equal rights or just equity. And I think that's just, we should be taught that, we should at least be taught how to have actual conversations with each other without getting really upset, let alone be taught that this is a reality that we're facing. And if at any time we present an opinion, we are probably going to be faced with an opposing one that is harsh. So I think there's some harsh realities that we're not taught as students, but we should be.
If I can just add something, I really love what Ellie said just now about the fact that although all these problems exist in our world, we should be taught about it, but shouldn't accept that. And I agree, because I think that what ends up happening is when students aren't taught about all the problems that exist, especially BIPOC students, they're not taught about the systemic racism or they're just not taught about all of the problems. And so when they go out into the real world, they end up being blindsided by, as Ellie said, like the wage gaps that occur, or the lack of job opportunities that may exist or may stand in their way. And so I agree with Ellie wholeheartedly that although yes, teachers or students, all students, not just BIPOC students, but all students need to be taught about all these problems, and then pushed to not accept them, not say, oh yeah, this is like how it is, this is the way that the world is. We're living in it, we can't do anything about it, but say, oh, these problems exist, let's try to make it better. So just, yeah, that was just something I wanted to say, that I totally agree with you, Ellie.
Thank you. And like to add to that a little bit more, I mean, the pressure shouldn't be all on teachers. I mean, how can they be like the only people pioneering for like equitable education? I mean, it really comes down to like equitable funding, uh, you know, getting the right curriculum in place and like being able to feel like they can actually talk about difficult subjects without a community outrage. So that's very important. And since my family is all teachers, I really see the harsh reality of, you know, having like having feeling like you need to talk to students about something that's really difficult, but you are also concerned about the backlash. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this is going back to responding to Ellie's comment about the teachers. I think one of the ways that we have to combat inclusivity, just not include exclusivity, excluding people, is to include more people in it. To combat hate, you have to combat it with love, right? So it's kind of the same thing if we want to combat this issue of like people stratifying themselves and making themselves higher than other people. We have to involve multiple different kinds of people to face that issue at different points. Honestly, teaching and education isn't going to be the only way that breaks racism, and awareness isn't going to solve the fight and set us free. But it is one way to do that, and it's a good effort. And when we talk about Black trauma and just other BIPOC trauma in America, it's very easy to get cynical about it. And I think one of the struggles that I've had growing up is balancing what it means to really be American, my Black side, and then my American side, my African side, and my American side, right? Because I love my country, let's be very honest. I probably would not work anywhere else. I think I have the immense privilege to be on this panel and to experience life as an African American, but that does not mean that my existence is easy. It doesn't mean that it's not worth the fight. It just means that I have to keep going, right? There's something to be fought for. And I think the catch-22 of being Black and American is the fact that my entire ancestry, my people have been here for a long time, my entire ancestry has given blood, life, light, everything for this country. And it has given minimally to me and to them. So it's like, I feel like a fraud if I leave this country or I kind of talk down on this country, but it's also if it's not working, if nothing is working, we have to change something different. So growing up, I was taught that America is the most progressive, moral, and accepting country in the world. And while this may or may not be true, this narrative made me feel that I, as a little Black girl, had no place on earth that would truly accept me. Because if America was this free country granting everyone unalienable rights and moving past old things like racism, sexism, homophobia, well, they don't even talk about gay people in school, let's be honest. But if America is the same country that is so free and so accepting, but also the same country that stole my ancestors, kidnapped them, enslaved them, and continually profit off of Black bodies and experiences, then there was no place for safety, no place for freedom or acceptance for me at all. It felt like, well, this was it. I was forced to be proud to be an American because if I lived anywhere else, I would be worse off, struggling more profoundly, and possibly starving in amidst war in some other country. So I was taught that to be an American citizen is to be blessed with however finite, intangible, and impermanent security the state is willing to grant me in that moment. So I'll let you guys respond to that or have any other thoughts before we close out. But I think Claudia's response is coming after this. So
The United States ideally stands for the idea of the land of the free, where everyone is seen equally as one under the law. However, it has been proven throughout history that as this concept has been attempted to be applied among the citizens, it has led towards the formation of the unknown side of it, or what we can call it the hidden truth, where citizens tend to be segregated among each other, and it tends to not be discussed nor taught about it. So we all can assume that we are successfully achieving this idea of equity.
That was great. I just want to thank you all, actually, all of you guys, for talking to me and talking about this, because I think this is such a valuable platform that we have right now. And I just really appreciate your guys' communication.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, I definitely think I definitely think that what you said, Kamara, was very well said, and I can relate to it a little bit, being or identifying as a Black female myself as well. But yeah, as Ellie said, I'm just really honored that I had the chance to be on this panel. And I'd like to thank you both and Claudia for all talking. And I'm excited that we get to use our platform in this way to talk about our experiences. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all for being with me today or tonight, whenever you guys are viewing this. And I hope to have more conversations with this. And if you would like to hear more from us, please use the hashtag to bring more attention and make a collective movement. The hashtag again is hashtag civics for us. That's a capital C, capital F, capital U, no space. Hashtag civics for us. Um, yes, so thank you for joining us. And stay safe, stay woke, and I hope I see you again. Please stay out of the COVID streets and wear a mask. And yeah, bye.